Well, it's absolutely brilliant to have you with us, and we're really thrilled. So thank you for joining us. So I'm going to start at the very beginning. So obviously, you've got a pretty fantastic dad who's just 2 squares to the right on you on my screen. And what a player you are, Derek. And what was it like as a young man? I guess being the same as me, you Salvation Army, growing up, at some point, somebody just said, there's an instrument. Was that kind of how it went?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I guess there wasn't much choice in my house. You were going to play cornet, right? Dad's not going to hand you euphonium or something. And so I think all of us were initially handed a cornet, and then, you know, you just got involved in the Army doing what Army kids do. You join the singing company, you join the YP band. You love to go to the Corps midweek because that's where all your mates were, and you're having a good time. More important, having a good time with them. You know, the band and the singing company was the excuse to have a good time with your mates.
Absolutely.
So, and then, you know, Dad, I guess Dad was involved in teaching. I don't remember having weekly lessons, but Dad conducted the bands. He was obviously helping out with the kids in the junior bands. At the time, he conducted the Metro Youth Band. And so, you know, as you sort of progressed along the rail track kind of thing, you kind of, you know, you fell under the leadership of Dad in one way or another. And then every now and again, Dad would say, you know, let's go in the basement and have a blow. And you know, we would go down and have a practice. And most of my, you know, so it was just kind of, it was observing Dad, hearing him play, going into the temples, into the temple, hearing the staff band play and a concert, hearing Dad play something like Heavenly Gales or Glorious Fountain, or especially in the 60s, you know, the 60 tour, Dad premiered Songs in the Heart by Liza, and then, you know, so I would have been a little guy, and I was hearing that, hearing him practice. That was just the norm of the house. That was just the noise of the house, Dad practicing. The same as it was for me in my house. People would say, well, doesn't it disturb the kids? No, they disturb the kids if I'm not making a noise. So that was the norm. So, you know, Dad was tough. He probably taught the way his dad taught, and I probably teach the way he taught. And so there was a certain amount of toughness and insistence that it be his way. And then you're listening and you're copying, and you can't help but, you know, the best teaching, in my opinion, is not verbal, it's oral, it's listening and copying. And so Dad would play in his lessons and say, make it sound like this, play it like this, and you just copied. And that was the way things went. And then as I got better, he would take me out to weekend engagements or whatever he was doing, and we'd play duets and stuff like that. And again, it was just, that was the norm of growing up. It wasn't a pressure thing. It was just, that was how it went.
Yeah, what an amazing experience, you know, and just to listen to your dad's sound this afternoon. What a beautiful sound Derek made, and to have that to copy. There is no better teaching than that, is there? It must have been amazing to play duets together, and to have 2 of you sounding like that must have been incredible.
Well, I think you know, the culmination of that was probably when I got in the staff band. I joined the New York staff band when I was still a senior in high school, and then I played in the staff band through my undergrad at Juilliard, because the staff band was gracious enough trying to get young people involved. They had a small scholarship, and every little bit of money helps when you go to school. And then I love banding, right? I grew up, I love that. But then to play at that time, when I first joined the band, Dad was sitting end chair, and so I sat down the line. I was 4th or 5th chair or whatever. And I remember one of the things we did was Heaton's Wonderful Words. And that's recorded on our LP by the staff band, I think, called Triumphant Faith, I think it is. And I think if you listen to that, it's hard to know who's where. I mean, Heaton's written a wonderful way anyway, and it goes over and above each other, the kind of this way. And so, you know, playing with that, I think it was kind of cool to hear the 2 of us together and not really know who was where when.
Who's playing?
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I don't actually know that, so I've made a note of that one. Triumphant Faith. Heaton's one of my favorite composers of all time. What an amazing writer, wasn't he?
Same here. Same here. One of the joys I've had and Matthew would tell you this, one of the fun things at UGA is when I got there, I was hired to go teach trumpet. And when I got there, they said, how about starting a brass band? I was like, are you kidding?
Wow. Yeah.
And so we started the UGA British Brass Band, and that's just been a gas. And I'm, in my opinion, there's nothing better that you can play as a young student, brass student, than brass banding. It does a wonder for your chops, your endurance, your music making, learning how to play as a part of a section, learning how to listen across the band. And the repertoire is just immense. I mean, it's so much better than orchestral brass ensemble repertoire. There's just so much more to play. And, you know, this has its challenges being in a university situation, obviously having E-flat horns. And we do use E-flat horns. And
do you? Wow, okay.
The kids play, I've only had one or two over the course of my 6 years there now who've insisted on playing with a French horn mouthpiece with a shank, but most of them play on an E-flat alto horn mouthpiece. And so it's been great. And it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I'm going to come on to that a little bit later, if that's okay, because I'd love to know a little bit more about the brass band scene in the US and what you've got going on there. Yeah. So obviously you were in the New York Staff Band as a kid. You were playing solos all the time, I guess. And then you ended up obviously going to the Juilliard when you were 18, I suppose, but you were a cornet player. So how was that experience going to the Juilliard as a cornet player to study trumpet? Did you have much trumpet experience before that time?
Not really. I mean, I played, you know, if you love to play, you find ways and places to play, right? So music,
absolutely, yeah.
Play in high school. So I did, you know, and then when you're coming to your 11th and 12th year of high school, you're meeting with your guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor is trying to sort of prep you as to, well, what are you going to do for your future? Where do you want to go? And, well, Phil, it looks like you enjoy music. So you've got straight A's in all your music classes. I even made the honor roll, but that was only because I had more music classes than technical classes. So it was just one of those things. And I can remember my band teacher, Mr. Fife, saying to me, you know, Philip, if you're gonna go into music teaching, you really need to be playing trumpet more. So probably somewhere along my 11th grade, 12th grade time, I can remember he had a trumpet, and he gave me a trumpet, but I used to stick in my old, the mouthpiece that I grew up playing on, which is a cornet mouthpiece, which is an old Herald mouthpiece, which is, you know, very small diameter, thin rimmed, very funnily. And I would just put that and a shank into the trumpet that I played. And it wasn't really until I started, I think, to think about taking auditions for schools that Dad took me, and we went down to Giardinelli Music Shop on Broadway there in the 50s, somewhere at that time. And we went in, and I got my first trumpet mouthpiece and got my first B-flat trumpet, which is exactly that horn. That's the only B-flat trumpet I've ever had. It's been overdone about 3 or 4 times, but that is my B-flat trumpet, 57,000 series for those that are interested in Bach numbers.
So it's Bach 57,000.
1969, I think. And that is my B-flat. But I got that horn, and the mouthpiece that felt just right in terms of diameter was a 10.5 C, a Bach 10.5 C. Okay. And I was like, man, I got instant high notes. This is great. I went from this funnel-held cornet mouthpiece to a C cup 10.5 C, and I couldn't believe the high notes that I had right off the bat.
That's amazing. So you went to Juilliard and to study trumpet, and what was it like? So obviously you were kind of, your background was this English cornet background, you know, and then you rock up at Juilliard. What was that sensation like? What was the first year like? You know, the first few months with other sort of kids who probably thought they knew a thing or two about playing the trumpet. How was that? How did that go?
Well, I think it was multifaceted. Again, coming out of the brass band world, I think I had a nice sound. I probably had good technique and stuff like that. I remember Vacchiano when I went in there to play my entry audition, I was playing organ number 1, and he stopped me a couple of times. That where it goes down to the left sharp, and he said, "Hey kid, play that again." And I went, "Hey kid, play that again." And he said, "I've never heard anybody play that F sharp like that." And what did I know? I was just doing what I was told. I was playing the way that Dad said I had to play. So I got into school, and that was that. But I was very much a cornet player. I went to while that audition determined me getting into school, the next audition that I went to on that first year was my orchestral audition. And Jean Morel was the orchestral teacher. And he was a mean person. And he spoke very French, very English with a very French. And he put up Peter and the Wolf, which for those that know is trumpet in C. I just picked up my B flat trumpet, that one there, and I played what I tore. And he said, Monsieur, what are you doing? And he proceeded to do something like do, re, mi kind of thing. And I'm going, what are you doing? I don't know what you're talking about. And he says, you must make different notes. You see that note, but it must be this note. And I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm playing what I see on the page, and I'm doing the best I can. What you're telling me doesn't make any sense. Consequently, for the first 2 years at Juilliard, I didn't play an orchestra. And wow. that truly, my first 2 years at Juilliard, I realized I was behind the 8 ball in terms of things like transposition. This whole thing of transposition was new to me. It's like, this makes no sense. Why do I have to do this? And I wasn't good at it. It was like learning a language too late. And I just remember struggling with that and feeling very much, I was a shy kid, I think, and a quiet kid. And the other kids were very bombast and very, you know, you'd have kids want to play duets with you, and they'd find your weakness and they'd exploit that, which was transposition. And I remember after a couple of years of Juilliard, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like this. I don't like the attitude of people. I don't like this business called orchestral trumpet player. It's not what I want to do. And I really would have, I remember sitting at a table with Dad, and I don't think he remembers this the way I do, but I remember being very distraught and not wanting to go back and crying at the kitchen table. And I remember Dad sort of insisting and say, look, you play with your horn. You don't play with words. You don't get embroiled in that. You just play with your horn. And lo and behold, things adapted and changed over the next couple of years. And then at that time, you did 4 years to do your undergrad, your bachelor's at Juilliard, and then you could do your master's in 1 year. I'd started my master's, and during that 5th year, the first year of my master's, I thought I better start playing some auditions just to see what it's like. And I went to play a few auditions. I think it was Honolulu was one of the first ones that came up, and they wrote back and said I didn't have enough experience. Duh, you're a student. The Miami Philharmonic, I couldn't do because the staff band had a weekend, and I couldn't miss the staff band. Yeah.
Band always comes first, Phil. We all know that.
And then the Calgary, Canada didn't even answer my letter or something like that. And the first group that answered, the 4th edition that came down, was Chicago. And I went and played. Lo and behold, I won, and there was no one more shocked than me. And people in the orchestral world were like, who the heck is Phil Smith? Where did he come from? And it went from there.
Amazing. But like, to say that you wanted to give it all up at the end of your 2nd year at Juilliard, and by the 4th year at Juilliard, you got a job. That's incredible. How did you find, like, the repertoire? Did you just really knuckle down to learning the repertoire, or had your teachers at Juilliard done a lot of sort of orchestral rep with you already?
I had 2 teachers. My first teacher at Juilliard was a wonderful man by the name of Ed Troidel. I studied with him for 3 years, and famous trumpet players that studied with him, people may know Carol Dorn Reinhardt. She went on to have a solo career in Europe and teach, and then taught in Vienna. And she was had a soloist career. Another name that people may know who studied with Ed Troidel was Lou Soloff, lead trumpet in Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And so Ed Troidel was a great teacher, in terms of teaching you to play the trumpet. And one of the things that I liked about him was he never put down the cornet. It was never, don't play the cornet that way. It was just an expansion of how you play this instrument, the trumpet. And so it was never cornet is bad, trumpet is good. It was just grow, widen your horizons, widen your oral horizons. I studied with him, and one of the reasons I left him in my third year at Juilliard was that I felt like I wasn't getting a lot in terms of, I was still felt personally weak in transposition, and I felt really weak in orchestral rep. And I went to Vacchiano, and I basically asked him, I said, I need a crash course and stuff. And he basically pulled out the first orchestral excerpt international book that used to be sort of the go-to book in those days. And we just started going through those things. So I became what I affectionately refer to as a lick learner. I learned licks. And I could play those licks, but if you turned the page on the music and said, play that, I couldn't tell you how it went, number one. And so really, when I won that Chicago job, I knew I was way behind the eight ball. Yeah, they had heard me play those licks pretty good, I guess, because I won.
Yeah, sure.
But I knew when I went into the rehearsals that I didn't know what was going. A funny story about that. One of my first weeks with the orchestra, we did Zarathustra. Okay. Well, every trumpet player knows bum ba dum bum, right? Yeah, sure. And you break out in a sweat as a trumpet player, especially if you're playing first, because you got the C octave call. Every one of us knows that, and then we all had to play that. I probably had to play that on the audition. But what I never looked at was that trumpets 3 and 4, while trumpet does bum ba dum bum, trumpets 3 and 4 are going 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, da-da-da-dum, dum, da-dum, da-dum. Well, you think about that, that's the beat. And you got, ba-dum, I can't even tell you now what it is, but it's got a whole lot of a whole lot of lines on those notes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I couldn't figure out where the heck the beat was on that thing. And so we went through there, and instead of 2, ta-dum, coming out, only the third trumpet came out. And I just thought, just ignore this, let it go, it'll go away. We went back, we did it again, and I still couldn't figure out where it was. Now I'm sweating. And we went back to do it a third time. So Herseth had to do bum ba dum bum. Yeah. And just before he gave the downbeat choke, he says, "Come along, fourth trumpet." At which point I broke out in a real bad sweat. And so how I got through that moment was that I leaned real close to Bill Scarlett, the third trumpet player. And when I had now heard this twice, and when I heard him breathe, I went ba-dum, ba-dum, and played with him. And I got pretty close. And we went by that. And I went home, and again, I broke down in tears on the way home. I was like, oh man, I don't know what I'm doing here. I got to learn this stuff. And
that's incredible.
Yeah.
And you sort of slipped over it there just very quickly, but did you say Sir George Schulte was the conductor in like your first week on the job, I guess?
No, he was the boss. He was the man who hired.
He was your boss.
Yeah.
Amazing. And what was that like? What was it like to be in his orchestra then? Was he?
He was a wonderful conductor. A wonderful conductor. Yeah. And just to show you kind of these things, one of the things, here's my first edition, right? So I'm out there.
Yeah.
Now I have just purchased in my 4th year at school a C trumpet for the first time. And actually it's the C trumpet before this one. It was just the one before that. And all of the kids at school said, if you're going out to Chicago Symphony, you have to learn all these licks on C trumpet because they only play C trumpet in Chicago. They don't play B flats. It's not like England.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, so that's cool. I learned as much as I could. One of the pieces I didn't spend much time practicing was Beethoven Leonora Call. That's the one from the offstage. And that's usually one of the first things you play at the audition. That's just to let you come out and get on stage and get something out of the way and feel comfortable. And I came out onto stage and I played and as I'm doing this, I could see Schulte turn to Herseth and go blah 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 blah, and Herseth turned to him and go blah 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 blah. And in my head, I'm going, I'm nailing this. They're digging it. And what I didn't realize was I put my horn down and Herseth says, Mr. Smith, he says, look at your trumpet. And I looked at the trumpet and I realized what I'd done. I had played B flat fingers on the C trumpet. And so I was a whole pitch out.
Unbelievable.
And at that point, I think in my mind, I probably thought I'd blown the audition. And so the rest of it, I wasn't nervous. I just played, and then it ended up I won. So just one of those kind of strange things.
And what was it like being in the section with the great Bud Herseth then? What was that experience like?
That I was 3.5 years in Chicago. I used to refer to myself as Principal Fourth. And I used to turn my chair because the Chicago Symphony trumpets, trombones, and tuba would sit in one big long row.
Okay.
And I used to just kind of angle my chair in such a way that I could just out of the corner of my eye look right down the line and just see everybody all the way down to Jacobs. I could see Bill Scarlett, Charlie Geyer, second trumpet, Herseth on first, Jay Friedman on trombone, old man Crisafulli on second trombone, old man Kleinhammer on bass trombone, and Arnold Jacobs on tuba. And I just used to watch and listen and watch and listen and then try to join in. And that was the biggest, best that was the best postgraduate study I could have done, sitting in there and just observing. I didn't play much the first year. I think Bud knew I was green as, he used to refer to me as, hey, greenhorn. But he said, I want you on stage. And so I would often sit on stage and he may pass down a bar or two and the other guys may pass a bar or two down. But what I was doing was I was sitting there and I was just absorbing like a sponge everything I heard, even though I didn't have much to play. I was absorbing what was going on and the sound and the concept and seeing seeing Schulte and seeing how they related, how that reacted. I could see a downbeat, but the brass was almost playing in front of the downbeat because you've always got a distance issue in an orchestra. Yeah. And it was a part of a process that I just was like, wow, this is interesting.
Amazing. Well, and so from there, you were there for nearly 4 years, were you, at Chicago?
3.5 seasons. I started January 75, so that's the half season of that year. And then I did 3 complete seasons. The last thing I did was a 78 tour of Europe where we played Bruckner 7, I think it was, in Albert Hall. And I was playing second trumpet to Bud at that point. Charlie Geyer had gone on to become first trumpet in Houston. I had already won New York, but I insisted that I go on the tour, and because I was playing second to Bud, and I wanted that to be the last hurrah.
Sure.
And I remember sitting in Albert Hall, and you can find videos on YouTube of me sitting playing, I think, a Tchaikovsky symphony and a Bruckner symphony in Albert Hall with Bud.
Amazing, fantastic. So, so then the New York job came up, and you actually said you'd already got the job. How was that move then? How did that go? Because Chicago's a great city. To move back to New York, what was that like?
To be honest, I didn't want to do it. At that point, really, had I stayed in Chicago, I would have been second trumpet. As I say, Charlie Geyer had moved on. How I got into Chicago was that Charlie Geyer was fourth trumpet, and Vince Chikowitz, famous Vince Chikowitz, was second trumpet. He retired. Charlie moved up to second, and they auditioned for fourth. Same thing kind of happened there. Charlie moved away, became first trumpet in Houston. I moved up to second, but in the meantime, I had won the first job. But I remember Herseth saying to me, look, you'll always wonder whether you should have. It's better you should go and play. And he said to me, I don't think I was a cocky character. I certainly wouldn't have verbalized this to him, but I think he kind of in his mind was just saying it the way it should be said. He said, there aren't many people who move up within a section to become principal of that section. You usually have to go away someplace else in order to come back as principal. But it's sort of the prophet in their own land kind of thing. I remember him saying that to me. And so he says, this is an opportunity for you to go to New York and see whether that's the kind of thing you want. And he says, we'll keep the job here for you for a year. And if at the end of the year you don't want to be in New York, you can come back here as second trumpet. So I knew I had that cushion. And that was a wonderful thing, really.
Yeah, that is incredible, isn't it? And it just shows what he thought of you as well, which is amazing too.
It was fun playing with him. He was a great guy to work with. He didn't say much. It was a bit like working with Dad. He didn't say much. You just listened and you copied. You just listened and you copied.
Sure.
And to me, that was the easiest thing to do. I guess that's the way I'd been taught. So I just, whatever he did, I did. And it was just a piece of cake. So I was quite happy sitting there. I could have sat there for a whole career.
Yeah, incredible. And so then you spend the next, what, 36 years or so at New York Philharmonic?
Yeah.
Just like that. And I was looking through the conductors that you had. I'd love to hear some stories. So I think it was Zubin Mehta there when you started. Is that right?
Yeah, the way that worked, Zubin Mehta followed Boulez. And actually, Jerry Schwartz, who was principal at the time, when Vacchiano retired as principal of the Philharmonic, Vacchiano's assistant was John Ware, who himself was a very fine player, but he'd spent an entire career basically being the assistant to Vacchiano. I think John expected to be moved up to principal, and it's kind of the story that I just said. And Boulez, rather than move John to, Boulez, who was the music director of the Philharmonic at the time, rather than move John to principal, brought in Jerry Schwartz and made Jerry Schwartz and John Ware co-principals. And Jerry Schwartz was very keen on conducting, and so he left the orchestra in Boulez's last year, and rather than Boulez fill that position, they waited because they knew that Zubin was coming as the new conductor. So they let Zubin do the audition. So I was, I think this is true, I think I was Zubin's first official hire at the Philharmonic in his tenure. And so that happened like in November of '74, but I actually didn't start until October of '75.
Okay.
Of '78, sorry.
Right.
No, I'm all screwed up here. That was, I started '78, and in November of '77, I think was the audition, but October of '78 was when I started.
Okay. So you,
whatever the dates were.
But you must have had a pretty good relationship with Mehta, because there's some wonderful videos on YouTube of you playing concertos and he's conducting you. You know,
he was the perfect guy to have for a young greenhorn to have as a music director. He loved music, and everything about his being, his face, was just like, this is great. And so whenever I was nervous about something, he would look back, because he conducted without a score. So he was always looking around the orchestra. He would always talk about it. He wanted to see eyes. And he'd just look at you and he'd grin like, this is going to be cool. You know, so you have that again, and you're about to play bum ba dum bum, and he'd look at you like, you ready? This is going to be great. Go! Yeah. You're just like, okay, if he's excited, why not? And so really, that facial experience and his demeanor was so encouraging for a young guy, as opposed to some of the older characters, someone like a Kurt Masur, who I dearly love, but his facial feature and his demeanor was very old school German. I am the boss and you're not. And just remember, whatever you do, you're wrong. That was sort of his facial demeanor. And
so that's interesting that you brought Kurt Masur, because I read somewhere that it said that when Kurt Masur became the musical director of the New York Phil, the orchestra sort of wanted a change of leadership. They wanted them to go in a different direction. So how did that, does that make sense to you? What does that mean?
It always does, right? It's like politicians. It's like president. Sure. Whoever you've had, the country, the nation, the orchestra decides, well, we know his strengths and his weaknesses, and now we want to go this way. And so Zubin, in my mind, he could conduct anything from any time period, but he was always accused of being kind of shallow in his interpretation. I think falsely, wrongly so. And he was so joyful that he wasn't serious enough. You know, there was too much smile in his face. He wasn't serious enough. So when he left, Mazur came in, that was the thing. We wanted someone who was much more deep into the music. Well, what we got was someone who was deep into the music, and believe me, there was no one better at doing Beethoven, Brahms, Schumann, the Germanic repertoire. I love doing that with Mazur, but he didn't have the capability to do the new pieces with the same, you know, instantaneous flamboyance that Zubin could do. So there was that. Well, then after a while, you know, when we get the next move, it's like, well, we need someone with that seriousness, but with a wider scope of repertoire. So we got Mazel. Okay. And we got someone with that age factor again, but had a wider scope of repertoire. And then when Mazel left and we got Gilbert, Alan Gilbert in, it was like, well, we need a new Lenny Bernstein. We've had all of these old guys now for the last 2 times. We need a young guy. So we got Alan Gilbert. And then it was like, well, we got Alan Gilbert, but he's so young and he's he's got growing to do. So then the next move. And that's the way things go. That's just, that's just history. Yeah.
Sure. So what was Alan Gilbert's mum and dad had been in the orchestra, hadn't they? He was quite young, and that's what amazing.
That's what I said to him when he became music director. I said, Alan, I remember you as a little kid, as 9 on my first tour. And he was sitting back there with the Rubik's Cube, him and his sister doing these Rubik's Cubes. And we're all the orchestra members standing around being gassed by these little kids doing this. I said, now you're the guy that's going to end up having to fire me.
So what's it like being the principal trumpet of an orchestra? You've got all those great conductors, but obviously I know that the rest of the time you've got other conductors coming in and going. What's it like being a principal trumpet of the New York Phil when there's a conductor in that you don't agree with and they're doing it like you don't want it to go? How frustrating is that?
I learned from Herseth, and this is very true. It's my job, it's our job to do what the conductor wants. We are his instrument. It's our job to do that. Now, having said that, having said that, there are some people that come in, and I think this happens in a lot of groups, right? We would try to do what the conductor wanted to do. So by the first concert Thursday night, we were really trying to do what he wanted to. But by the time we got through Friday and Saturday and next Tuesday, the 4th concert, we probably had drifted back to the way that we wanted to play it. He was now out of control. He wasn't rehearsing us, and he was now losing control, and we were beginning to do what we wanted to do with it. So that's, again, that's just the way, that's the nature, that's human nature. I want it my way. I can remember very well, and I'll just guess I'm not being mean. I can remember doing a Mahler Spitz. We did, I can't tell you how many Mahler Spitz I've done. But, and I've done them with great conductors, really some terrific conductors. But I remember one time we did it with Michael Tilson Thomas. Okay. And I don't think I got any further than where I've been cut off. And I was like, I only got 4 notes out. What are we It's just like, and I remember him telling me, giving me a whole lecture as to what he wanted to do. And by the time he was done and we were done with the next 20 minutes of rehearsal, I was like, I don't even know what to do with the opening of this anymore. And I can remember joking and saying, you know, I felt like I wanted to put a paper bag over my head and put up a sign that said, this does not represent the opinions of the first trumpet player. But, you know, my job is to do it the way he wanted. Yeah. That was his thing. So I did try, but to be truthful, by the time we got to probably Saturday night, I was doing it my way.
Yeah, that's always the best way, I would imagine. So, I mean, an incredible career. There's lots I want to talk about to do with the orchestra. What were your highlights? What are the highlights? Like special performances, or is it too difficult to sort of narrow that down to a few?
I always have a hard time narrowing things down to best conductor, best piece. You know, the simplest thing for me was to say that I've been blessed. The Lord has blessed me in mighty ways to have 36 years in the Philharmonic and 3.5 in another great orchestra, and to see the world. I mean, can you imagine the first tour I went on with Chicago Symphony? We went to Japan. We toured the entire nation of Japan. And as a young kid, it was, this is incredible. And then with Zubin, we did a 5-week tour where we started in, I can't remember if we started in Korea or Japan, but we hit Korea somewhere in there. and we worked our way down through the entire Pacific Rim, ending up in his home country of India, in Delhi, Calcutta, and Bombay.
Wow.
It's called Bombay in those days. And just seeing that whole, all of this culture as you come around that Pacific Rim, what a blessing. I've been, you know, join the Philharmonic and see the world. I mean, I can't, it's been a thrill.
Yeah, that's incredible. And of course, you've had so many great friends in the orchestra and great musicians around you. There's someone on the screen down here, Roger Argento, who's a good friend of mine, who's the head of brass at the Royal Welsh College of Music in Jarman in Wales. Give us a wave, Rog. So Roger was bass trombone in the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra for 28 years, I think, and has recently moved to Cardiff. And he very kindly invited me to a masterclass with Joe Alessi last week, which was incredible. And I just would like to know a little bit about your relationship with Joe. That must have been such an incredible time to play with him and just to be in the orchestra, you guys together.
Yeah, I mean, again, the highlights: join the Philharmonic, see the world, join a group of great musicians and learn from each other, be challenged by each other.
Sure. Perhaps
have to sort things out because you got varying differences of opinion as to how you do things. But I've had some great experiences with great brass players, and I'll just talk about the brass because that's what we're doing here. But I mean, Alessi and I sitting next to each other, again, we developed a relationship where I knew what he was doing and he knew what I was doing. We didn't have to ever speak to each other. We just, it was just like tea for two kind of thing. Having Phil Myers playing principal horn just off to in front of me and off to my right there, and hearing some unbelievable horn playing. You know, from the grandiose to the smallest, from the loudest to the softest, from the most tearing of sounds to the most beautiful of sounds. And it's Phil Myers' birthday coming up later this week, and I often think, you know, we had rubs like any family.
Sure, yeah.
Anyone here had a fight with their spouse this week? Yeah. Well, we have those same kind of things. We're not even married, but in some ways we were, because we had to learn how to deal with each other and work with each other. I learned a lot from all of those guys, and I would like to think and hope that they learned from something from me, and that we all grew in incredible ways.
Sure.
You know, we were challenged and yet we grew. So yeah, Joe was a great friend. One of the joys I've had, and I'm disappointed because of this Chinese virus thing that we've got going on here, but the upcoming holiday brass, ever since the Philharmonic Brass Quintet, we started 25 years ago doing, when I first came to New York, there was not a hint, not a smell of Christmas. It was not PC in a city like New York to have anything to do with Christmas. And I thought, this is nuts. First of all, I come from a brass band, Army tradition. Let's get the brass out on the kettle. Let's do something.
Yeah, let's do it.
And so we started by just playing Christmas. I would take the Army Christmas books in, and we'd play Christmas carols before and after the concerts, just in the balcony. And then our quintet started to work with the Canadian Brass Quintet. And so we brought them in and we did 10-piece Christmas concerts, the holiday brass. And one of the hopes that I'd had, and it finally came into being in 2014 when I retired, was they let me have the entire Philharmonic brass and percussion section. And since 2014, we've had holiday brass with the entire Philharmonic brass section. So to have my buddies playing and, you know, to have them allow me to go and create the program, conduct the program, host the program, MP the program, MC the program, has been a great thing. And I'm so disappointed that that's not going to happen for the actual 25th anniversary this coming December.
Oh, that's sad to hear. I'm sorry about that. I sent the band this afternoon your double concerto with Joe, just to say, because I thought it's just incredible. And I thought that they should get some of that fun relationship that you obviously have with him, which comes out on that recording that's out, is just brilliant. What a piece that is, isn't it? But how long did that take you to get together? I mean, what ridiculous.
Well, it's an interesting piece, right? It was
Sure.
composed a friend of Mazur's. And so Mazur was all about doing this piece, and it's a tough piece, and in some ways it's a good piece. I don't think it was our favorite, but it can, and it was built on this nature of the story of this competitive and competing, I can't say the word, competing artists, you know, the musicians, and so the whole piece is built on that, and it comes to this cadenza. And this guy had created this cadenza with what looked like chicken scratch. There were no notes in the cadenza. It was just like squiggle lines. And we were supposed to make something out of this cadenza. So here's the honest truth. The honest truth is I said to Joe, I don't know how we're going to do this. We got to come up with a better system than this. And we need to have a little bit of fun with this. If you've watched any of the videos that Joe and I did when we were bored on tour, we always found ways to have fun. So we actually hired Joe Turin, my buddy, and had Joe Turin, we told him what we wanted to do to the cadenza, and he kind of sketched out this cadenza for us, which is what you hear when you listen to the thing, where we're having, like, we're quoting each other. He goes high, I go high, he goes low, we go, and, you know, T for two, and anything you can do, I can do better. That all kind of comes out of that, and that whole cadenza thing. Now, we recorded it that way. And Mazur bought into it, but I'm not sure the composer bought into it. But
really?
It's the way it is. That's the way it got recorded.
Well, it's brilliant. I love it. It's fantastic. So I want to come back to you, really, specifically. And just sort of one of the questions we got, there's a friend of mine who's in the band who you've actually had dealings with in the past, a lovely man called Giovanni Reyes, an Italian trumpet player. Gio, are you there somewhere? I can't see you on my screen. He's got to be somewhere, but don't worry. Anyway, Giovanni is there he is. Say hello, Gio.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you.
So Gio's got a question. Gio sent me some questions, and I've got them in front of me, just in case he's forgotten. But the question that Gio was asking me was, what are you thinking whilst you play and whilst you make that beautiful sound? What's going on in your head?
Ultimately, there should be nothing going on other than sing, sing, sing.
Okay.
If there's any thought process going on, that's probably not a good idea, because the thought process can turn into it can not just be a positive thought process. It can be a negative thought process. Sure. It can be, and especially when you're in the business of having to do things multiple times. You know, maybe you had a bad performance on one go around, and so now when you're coming up to your cack note moment, you don't want to be going, oh golly, here comes the cack note moment, because all that does is self-prophesy. And so, as I tell my kids, you need to be singing. Literally, there's a silent Gabriel singing up here. You are singing to your Gabriel, and I've stolen that, to be quite honest, from Vince Panzarella, who was my second trumpet cohort, who often referred to that as, we need to play to our Gabriel, and I thought that's brilliant. Now, whoever that Gabriel is for you, so if you're playing a concerto, it may be that you heard your favorite, you know, Wynton Marsalis do it that way, or Maurice Andre, you know, whoever your favorite soloist is, and you're singing what you heard up here in your mind. Your mind singing what that. You're not listening to you. You're not listening and going, boy, I sound great. No, that's a negative, because you live with that cockiness, you'll die with that cockiness. So you're singing to your Gabriel all the time. That's what should be going on.
Okay. And how did you deal with Mark? You know, you talked about Mahler 5 and your pictures at an exhibition, you know, so the orchestra are given the A and you're sitting there on the stage and you're just waiting and waiting. How did you deal with that as a player, as a performer? What was...
That's it. You can't, you got it. And in my mind, it's people, we often talk about sports figures that get into their quote unquote game face.
Mm-hmm.
All of us are different. When I'm uptight, I tend to go solemn and quiet. Other people go loud and giddy.
Sure.
But for me, it was there. But your process has to be one of remembrance of what you've done, remembrance of positive thought. Like, you know, heck, if you're going to be playing bum ba dum bum, and every practice session you've come up with a seventh instead of an octave, well then before you play, you're going to be sweating bullets. So you have to build from confidence. You have to know that you can do this. You've had to have sorted out, how am I getting through this? Where am I breathing? What do I have to do to make this come off? If I have to take, you know, I often tell my kids, sometimes you have to set yourself up and play something in some way that helps you get through it, and you refer to it as style. But it helps, you know, I need a breath here, so I'm going to lead into this breath and I'm going to go out of this in a certain way. And it's consistency. And that's the other thing I learned from her. It's consistency. He played it the same way every time. I knew what he was going to do. You knew where he was going to breathe. You knew where he was going to crescendo. You knew where he was going to grow. You knew what was going on. And it's that consistency that gets you through all of these patches.
It's incredible. So if you'd be kind enough, really, Phil, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences with dystonia. I'm sure some of the band don't even know what focal dystonia is, and maybe you could just talk to us a little bit about that, if you'd be kind enough to do that.
Dystonia is something I never thought would happen to me. And to be honest with you, I can't tell you why it happened. I don't know. I'm not sure anyone. To be honest, I don't want to listen to anyone try to tell me why they think it happened. I've heard, I've read, even from someone that in my coming through dystonia, and let me be clear, I have not conquered dystonia. I am continually trying to find a way through it. But in my process, I went to a lovely lady by the name of Jan Kagarice, who gave me a lot of information. And then I started to read from other people because I still felt like I was struggling. And I'm thinking, well, let me search out other people. So I went to someone like Lucinda Lewis, who has a book entitled Ambassador Rehabilitation. I went to other people that had different things to say about it. I really read as much as I could about it. And at a certain point, I sort of came to the decision, well, I've got a lot of information. It's a little bit like learning to play. You get a lot of people tell you to do this, that, the other. There comes a time when you have to sit there and kind of figure out your journey for yourself. And you have to kind of go at it yourself. And I've sort of gone at it that way. But I've had someone say to me that I read, or refer, not say to me, that someone referred of my case of being people struck with dystonia are inefficient players. And I'm thinking, I don't think so. I don't think I could have done my career as an inefficient player. Something else happened. And so I can't go there. Now, can the result be inefficiency? Yes. And you're trying to find a way through this. Can you get, and can it become too tense? I mean, for me, dystonia was something letting go on this upper left side. In fact, I can remember with one of the last recordings I did, an album that's the Salvation Army has released called Trilogy. It has my first CD that I did, the first LP that I did with Joe Turin. It has one that I did with Graham Tovey and GUS Band, and they were called Rigid Containers at the time. Sure. And it has a new one, which is my last, and it's the hymns, the unreleased hymn tracks. And as I was doing that, that was about a year or two, probably 2 years before I got hit with dystonia. I can remember the sound guy saying, I hear hissing. Is there hissing there? Is there a mic making noise? No, what it was this was letting loose. And I was having to let go. And at that time, I could shut it down. I could make it work.
Yeah.
So there was something that became inefficient where I was making my mouth tighter to hold this. Does that create inefficiency? Yes. So where am I going with this? My struggle is perpetual. I've learned different things. It certainly affected how I teach. There's things that I did as a player that I would not do now. I'm like, for instance, you know, I was a good mouthpiece buzzer.
Okay.
And I would practice in the car an hour and a half to work. I'd be playing all of this repertoire on the mouthpiece. Yeah. But that isn't how we play. And I can prove that to you by you going and watching a site on YouTube by John Harbaugh, Harbaugh. He's from the University of Washington on the West Coast, and it's called Trumpet Physics. He can make a glass tube that's 3 foot long and as big around as that. He can make a glass tube play a note. Well, that glass tube doesn't have any lips, but it's energized air through the tube that creates vibrancy and creates sound, and that creates a foghorn sound. And so that is what needs to happen. So when I first was practicing with Jan, the first thing she did was get me off the horn. And that's why it's retraining.
Yeah.
You can't keep, I used to say, but Jan, I have to do this. She said, no, we're retraining. And it was just blow a candle. Now, just blow through the mouthpiece. Blow through a pipe. She actually handed me straws, from big Slurpee straws, from big thick ice cream milkshake. Just big Slurpee straws. Just direct the air through that straw. Throw it to the back end of, yeah, down the pipe, on the lead pipe. Just think of this as a brass straw, or a silver straw, or a gold straw. Get away from the horn. Wait a minute. I have to lick my lips. No, you don't. Wait. It's like the batter that comes up. They probably do this in cricket, right? They come up, they kick the dirt, they move their hips around, they do all kinds of things before they hit the ball, right? None of that has anything to do with hitting the ball. But it's just the routine that they go through. And this is just, it's playing an instrument, a brass instrument, is air through lips that vibrate. Just put the mouthpiece over the aperture, and I would go, well, that's not how I play. I used to twist my lips. Well, I don't want to talk about that. Let's not go there. Let's just. Right. Well, the first time that came out without any air coming out of here, I was like, holy smokes, something is, that's unique. Now, how do I get to the next note? I didn't know, and I've had to retrain myself to go through that whole process. Do I still drift back into my old ways of playing? Yes, and when I do, it doesn't work. It falls apart. And so there are times, there are elements, I have to keep it very simple. Air through lips that vibrate. To keep my lips further apart, I said to her many times, I feel like I could stick my pinky in the aperture. I feel like my aperture is so open. She says, that's okay. That's fine. Because you will figure out how to make that work. Just as Federer wasn't taught, grab the racket this way. He found out how efficiency worked, and that worked for him. So you will figure this out. You have to go. Forget what you know. You almost know too much. In fact, you do know too much. Go back to being 7 and not knowing anything and just start to play again. And that's what I've had to do.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know that's going to be helpful to people who are listening and watching. And that's just a brilliant to taking us through that. That's amazing. And you must be.
It's not. Let me say this. It's not an easy process.
No, it must have.
I can remember when I was diagnosed with this. I've been to see a lot of doctors, and I finally got the diagnosis, and the dreaded dystonia word came. And I remember going back and sitting in my car and just breaking down like, Lord, what is this? Where did this come from? Now, me and God had a lot of conversations, a whole lot of conversations with God, and a lot of tears and some anger.
Sure.
Like, really? I've tried to honor you, Lord, as best I can, and yet this is the payback. And while I never heard God say anything audibly, I over and over felt in my spirit the Lord just say, just trust me. And that has been the hardest thing to do, and yet in some ways the best thing to do, because perhaps one door,
Sure.
I would still be in New York today, perhaps. It's only been 6 years since I had to pull out, and now I'm helping kids down in Georgia and having a great time there, and God opened another avenue. And I don't know the why of that. I just have to trust him. And I've been too stubborn to give up. I wish I could play like I used to play, but I can play a bit. And maybe the Lord is teaching me some things that way too. And I also think that God is not an Indian giver. I don't think that God gives gifts and then yanks them away and says, ha, ha, ha. No, I think things happen in life, but God says, hang on, we're going for a ride. Maybe it's because he can trust me that he gave me this.
Oh.
Because I won't deny him and say, God, you're a stinker because of this. That my faith is still strong.
Yeah. God wants you to do his work in a different way, Phil,
Yeah.
And those kids in Georgia, I'm sure, will be a testament to that, and how lucky are they? How lucky are those kids in Georgia to have you there? They are the luckiest people on this planet,
Well, and it is such a great thing for me to be challenged. There's a guy I'm looking at down the bottom here, Anderson Romero. Anderson was one of my first students when I went there, and he was doing his doctorate, and he's now second trumpet in the New Jersey Symphony. And I can remember him saying, come on, Mr. Smith, at the end of the lesson, him and Jeff Wood, they were two of my Bulldog brass quintet guys. And I know what they were doing. They'd save 5 or 10 minutes in and listen and say, let's play duets. And I'm going,
Sure.
It was, no, let's play duets. And they kind of pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. And so I got as much from them, and I've gotten as much from all of my students continually as I give out. I know I do. I get challenged by them.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. It must be a wonderful place to be able to share those experiences with you. So that's amazing. So tell us, because I can tell, having only met you on here this evening, that you're a brass bander through and through. You love your brass bands, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So tell us, what is that experience like at Georgia then, in Georgia, having your own brass band? What repertoire are you teaching them? How are they reacting to it?
Well, let's be clear. I was fundamentally an Army brass bander, right?
Me too. Yeah, there's lots of us here.
Yeah, and my playing was in that environment, so I know a lot of Army repertoire, and tends to be older Army repertoire rather than newer. But one of the things I like about Army repertoire is just the way it's scored, and that your top voice, your top folks will be challenged, but then it may sort of thin itself out as it goes down the line a little bit. And so when you've got a band and you start in a band and kids, it's the first experience they've had in it, and maybe you don't have the depth or something like that, it's neat to be able to pick up Army repertoire and know that it'll be challenging for the group that's there. But then I've also had to teach myself and learn myself a little bit about more outside band rep. But we've just had a great time. We've been through a ton of repertoire, outside band repertoire and SA band repertoire, old and new. I was just talking the other day about a couple of favorite pieces, and especially in the time that we're all living in. One of my favorites is, and we've done it with the UGA Brass Band, is Eric Ball's Triumph for Peace. We've done another favorite is Heaton's Just As I Am.
Yes,
you know, I gotta be careful. I'm in a public university, so I gotta be careful. I can't be like, I can't be teaching the words kind of thing, but I can communicate the idea. And when Billy Graham passed away, I thought, bingo, there's an opportunity for me to present this hymn that everybody knows from watching a Billy Graham crusade at the end, when they would sing Just As I Am for the altar call. How appropriate is this to Billy Graham's passing was a way for me to bring that piece into the university to present it and to speak about the hymn in that way. And so
it comes back down to the singing as well, Phil. You know, the whole thing about the word. We've had conversations on here with Steve Cobb and Bram Tovey. I don't know if Bram's around this evening. He said he might drop in, actually. But about how the word in a hymn, Salvation Army bands just play a hymn tune in a different way than let's say, an outside brass band player, because we know what those words are and we won't know what those words mean. And so that's a really interesting way of looking at that kind of music too.
It is, and that's one thing you can teach. And so I may refer to the words from time to time or something, and just say, you know, as you would be singing this phrase. And we have a great choral tradition at UGA, and so, you know, kids can relate that as well. As you would have to sing these words together. You can't go da 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 da. No, it's not going to be. There's got to be these words all have to tie themselves together. There's stresses. There's, as you say the word Jesus, or people who need people. There's, you know, there's the strong end of people, and there's the weak end of people, and there's the people who need people. All of that, the consonants get softened by the vowels. People who need people, and that all has to sound just the same. Sing those words through the horn. So yeah, you can refer to the words, but you can also refer to it just on its lyricism as well. It's easier to have the words, to be honest.
Yeah, it's nice to have the words, isn't it?
Yeah.
What was I going to say? There was something else about the essay repertoire I was going to mention to you. We play a lot of essay repertoire as well, because we've got a good number of Salvation connections in the band. One of my favourite newer composers is a guy called Martin Cordner, who you might have met. But he's got some really cool rep for like younger bands, youth bands, and they really love playing his stuff. It's quite Star Warsy, but it's great, you know?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and we've done Fire in the Blood. We did that recently.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We've done a lot of things. I had to pull out some of the stuff that we've done. I forgot. It's amazing, you know, you go through stuff. We had a Bruce Broughton, fall of 2019, we did Bruce Broughton stuff. So in fact, we did Lovett Cooper's Fire in the Blood on that program. We did Good Old Way. We did Harlequin of Bruce Broughton. We did some of his movie stuff. Yeah, we've had some good fun. And then of course you mentioned Joe Alessi. We did a Christmas concert with Joe Alessi. So we did, it wasn't Christmas per se, but we did Zambezi, the Philip Spark thing there, and the folks enjoyed that little Latin American thing going on. So yeah, we've had some good rep.
What would you say the difference is between American brass players and English brass players, Phil? Could you put your finger on it?
This is an un-PC question, especially.
Okay, I'm very sorry, but you know, and I know you've got students in the house, so be very careful. But,
yeah,
you know.
in this time, we're trying to find things that unify us, not spread us. But, no, I think I would probably say that, and this will carry over into the brass band thing. American kids are not trained in a brass band situation. They're trained in an orchestral or even in a wind band situation where you're kind of one on a part. And there's this kind of sense of self-importance And therefore, I think American brass tradition can become very independent and very isolated. And I'm constantly saying, I don't need, when I look at the front row, I don't need 5 fingers of sound. I need 1 palm of sound.
Sure.
And that then is where I think we can get the English thing comes a little stronger. They're thinking more in that term, in that color.
Sure.
How many of your really great English brass players have grown up in a brass band tradition? Many of them. And so I think they sort of naturally fall into that. My band, because of the experience where we were online the last 6 weeks, I sent out a project where we never got to play. We shut down 1 week too soon, so we never got to play our program. So I sent out various recordings of different bands playing our program, pieces on our program, and I asked the kids to write in and tell me what they heard. And generally, if they were English bands, they were referring generally to the group sound, that it was, you know, but even there was still the dynamics. American bands love to play loud, but we often get soft enough. But you know, you hear a Corey or a Black Dyke or any of the great bands, and they've got this volume that comes this way, but man, can they get down here as well?
Sure.
And our kids were impressed with hearing stuff like that. So I would say an individualism is sort of the theme of an Americanism type of music, brass music concept, whereas unity is kind of the theme of a British brass kind of situation.
Very much so. And brass bands brings us all together too, doesn't it? So whilst, you know, you're in America and we're in the UK, brass bands is definitely a community thing. And that's the key. I think the key to the success of our movement is that it's all to do with bringing people together. I've just had a question. We've got a very good friend. In fact, our vice president of the band is a trumpet player you may know called Mike Lovett. He's with us this evening. Give us a wave, Mike.
How are you, Mike?
Come on, Mike. Here he comes. Say hello, Mike.
Hi, Phil.
How are you, Mike? Good to see you, man.
It's great to meet you. Yeah, great to hear your stories. I've always admired your playing from over here. It's fantastic. Love the sound you made and everything. It's great.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man. Love hearing you stuff too.
Why don't you ask?
The question I wanted to ask you, Phil, was actually, I recently, well, a couple of years ago, I came across Song of Hope through Ryan Anthony and the Cancer Blows concert. And of course, the recording which really inspired me was from the live concert which you conducted.
Yeah. I heard your thing. You did it with Philip and who was the third one? I can't remember.
Gareth Small.
Gareth Small.
Yeah. And I enjoyed that. That was good to hear.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Well, it was your performance that inspired me anyway to do that.
Well, it's a wonderful piece, eh? I mean, it's a beautiful piece. And so, yeah, when Ryan, by the way, let me just say this, and I haven't heard anything recent, so I'm hoping I'm not out of touch much here, but we all need to be praying for Ryan.
Yeah.
The last bit that I got from Ryan was that it's coming to an end. And it's a struggle. He's a fighter. He has fought through this cancer, something incredible. But I saw him in January, and it had really taken a toll. And we just need to be praying for him, his wife, his kids.
Sure.
The battle is hard, and it's, I think, coming to the last days, to be honest. So just keep him and his family in your prayers, please. But such a wonderful opportunity to hear that piece and then have Ryan and different Dave Bilger, Chris Martin, Mike Sachs, a bunch of them different guys played it on different events that we've done. And it's just fun. And you know, of course, with me dealing with my dystonia, he wanted me to be a part of things. And I was always a little frightened to jump in and be the player when I saw some of the parts, but I said I'd be happy to conduct it. I would love to conduct it. So he was gracious.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful. It's very inspiring.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's lovely that brass bands can bring all of us, these people together. It's great. You know, we live all around the world. It's a very big world, but the brass band community seems to be very friendly. And the whole relationship with you and myself, with Gordon and the Hill family and your dad, it's just so wonderful that we've been able to get this together.
Yeah.
We're a growing community, Phil. We've got over 100 members of our bands. And we love making music. You know, we might not be the best at it, but we love doing it. And the community that we've created, we're very proud of. If you could give us a 30-minute little routine to go away with, as you know, brass players that want to get better, what would be in your 30-minute routine for us?
Okay, well, I'm not overly a big person on routines.
Okay.
You can play routines, but don't be a routine player.
Good, like it.
Remember Herseth, and that's a Bill Adams quote, I believe.
Okay.
And I remember Herseth saying, never practice, always perform. That said, if I could give you maybe 4 things to think about. That if in your practice time, you spend some time on the subject of air. That can be long tones. That can be things like Vince Chikowicz, the study. Just a beautiful melodic thing. And then he keeps expanding that. Okay. But you can play that in a routine way, or you can play that in a musical way. Always perform it. So the first thing is thinking about air. That could also be something like long tones. Chikowicz, it could be violin, or what other people refer to them as bugle slurs. And go slow. I'm singing it fast to get through it. Yeah. Air, that's the first thing. Second thing, air fingers. What do I do with air fingers? Could be Clark studies. Herbert Clark. In all the keys. Get all the keys, all the ugly keys. Yeah. Get them all in there. It's air and fingers.
Listen, Phil, I've got to tell you, I'm a trombone player, right? And I can be sitting on the sofa watching a thriller, playing chromatic scales with my fingers. Why am I doing that? I'm a trombone player, but I do it all the time. It's a terrible habit. Well, a good habit, you know. I'm a failed trumpet player. What can I say? Okay, I disturbed you. Carry on.
That's right. You got air. Air is the first thing. Beautiful tones. And the other thing with air that I like to do, especially now with the stone air, I like to start things from a who-do point of view. Who. I'm on a C trumpet. So I get the air going through the horn. And the purpose of that is to make sure that air is moving, and then I go to find the note. What that go to find the note does is means I come into shape. And I find just where that note speaks, so that I'm not playing from too tense a position and trying to go, or I get this pinchy tone. So who-do. When I'm referring to things often, I start with who-dos. So air fingers, air tongue. What's air tongue? Could be da 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 da. Da, 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 da. Now, how do I do that with a who? And it could even go back to the Clarks. It could be da 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 da. You can go right to Arbenz, where it's air tongue. The air makes the note speak. We don't spit, or we don't tongue the note out. We air it out. and the tongue is there to just clean it up. So air, air fingers, air tongue, air fingers tongue. All right, that's the fourth one. Air, second one is air fingers, third one is air tongue, fourth one is air fingers tongue. And that one I could easily go back to Clark studies. So I'm slurring the first two notes of that. Then I slur notes 2 and 3. Better than that, but you get the idea. Then I slur notes 3 and 4. Then I do 4 and 1. So I get used to moving that where that slur on the tongue bit is. Then I throw them in 3s and I move those around. And I'm getting used to all kinds of different patterns so that I don't get used to playing my scales where I'm always tongue slurring the first 2, but I begin to independently create the ability to move slur and tongue around. So in a routine, and I've just used Arbans, I've used violin, I've used Vince Chikowitz, I've used Clark studies. You can use lots of different things. Now, let me quickly add to that basic pattern of 4 things: air, air fingers, air tongue, air fingers, tongue. By the way, you can do those Clark studies and you do them in minor. You don't have to write them out. You just write the minor key in front of the major key. So if you're doing F, you can do it in natural, or you can do them in harmonic or melodic, whatever. And you learn to do those so that you practice them. You're not just reading again what's on the page. You're using your head. What did I learn from Vacchiano? Head. Man, he was constantly pushing my head. What did I learn from Herseth? Sing. Those are the 2 different things. The other thing quickly, if you're looking for books that are helpful in this, this is a wonderful book. This is by Mike Sachs, S-A-C-H-S, and he'll take you through daily fundamentals, and he'll give you, if you have 40 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, he'll give you a proposition to follow, a program to follow. Another great guy that I will mention here, a lot of the stuff can be found online. There's some wonderful academic guys. This is a daily warm-up and the gentleman's name is Brian Shook, S-H-O-O-K. I don't believe in recreating what other people spend wonderful amounts of time creating. And this is another one where you can find some daily warm-up routines. And in fact, he's using long tones, hoo-doo-doo that I just mentioned about. He uses Chikowitz one in here. He uses violin, just as I was saying here. He uses finger dexterity. So all of those kind of things. You can find that for free online. Print it out, it's about 10 pages. It's a pretty good deal. So there's lots of things there. There's many routines to find. Just go searching online, you'll find them. But the point is, don't be a routine player, be a performer. Sing, always sing, find a way to sing. The other thing that I would say is make sure whatever books you've got some kind of lyric book, something of lyric studies. Sing and make music in your heart to the Lord. Some more by Blazevich. We steal from the trombone players playing some nice Conconi. Or if that's too hard to find and you just want to do something nice, flip and get out our hymn tune book and play the hymn tunes.
Don't knock it.
And that way you got the words in the hymn tune book as well.
I think where mine is. Look, don't tell the rest of the band because I'll be in trouble with the librarian. But look,
there you go.
I've been doing mine every day, so you know, can't go wrong.
Just play hymn tunes,
Listen,
and
Philip.
play them in all keys. That's the other thing.
Okay.
Part of transposition is you learn to read upper fourth, or in clefs. I prefer clefs, but if you begin to read upper second, upper third, minor third, major third, upper fourth, right? But the other part is transposition is oral. It's being able to play Happy Birthday. Just being able to play it. Learn to play in different pitches and different keys. You can be looking at one thing and playing it in the other, and you're beginning to work transposition, which is worth oral as well as mental.
Yeah. Phil, my relationship with your playing started when my dad, who's on the screen somewhere, bought your album with Dudley Bright, the Principal's album. And yes, with Dudley. And you played Blessed Assurance on that album, and I'll never, ever forget it. And I think I wrote it to you in an email, but I can remember everyone else in our house being sick of hearing it, because I just kept playing it and playing it and playing it, to the point where I had to get my dad's headphones out and just, because I couldn't believe it. Your flugel playing was incredible, and then Bill Himes wrote that amazing arrangement, and then there's the key change, and you came in with your trumpet, and I just couldn't believe it, you know. I'm very lucky that both Amersham Band, we've played it with Mike. Mike's taken your lead, and we've done it on solo concerts, haven't we, Mike? It's an incredible piece of music, but you playing that was a real moment in my life. I'll never forget it. And on behalf of everybody at Amersham, I just want to thank you so much for giving of your time, being so honest and open with us. It's been an extraordinary pleasure for me. As you probably know, we're building our own band hall and academy at the moment. We're nearly finished. We've raised an awful lot of money. And there wouldn't be a finer honour than to have you come and visit us maybe next year. Once we're allowed on planes again, if you'd like to come and visit us in Buckinghamshire next year, it would be such a joy to welcome you. So please, next time we're in the UK.
Yeah, I would love to do that. I mean, I think it's wonderful. You know, it's the best thing you can do. I mean, it's in the tradition of army banding, and your band is doing it. Bands over here like Fountain City and band in Raleigh, I can't remember their official name right now, but they all start youth bands. They get kids going and then they come up through the system. And you know, that was the same at Star Lake Music Camp or something like that. It's getting kids going and then bringing up, and first of all, the idea that we perform, we play. How do we get into this? Because we like to play.
Sure.
And all the other trappings, all the other fears, perfection, all of that comes after the fact. And quite honestly, that's just life. It's like the devil is into destroy, despair, and he brings all of the other stuff in there. God created it perfect in the beginning, and then the devil brought in all the ugly stuff. But we got into this for the joy of playing. And it's the nasty stuff that gets in the way and starts creating problems. And we just have to constantly remind ourselves the reason we play, the reason we sing is to make music and to enjoy God's gift of recreation, which is just wonderful. That Blessed Assurance, I asked Steve to do that. And I wanted something that just had, I love the song. But when you get to the second verse there, that perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight, and that, I mean, when you get the and it's just bang, that's more than trumpet playing. That is a subconscious image of the song. And I'm watching and waiting. I'm looking above. I'm looking above. I'm looking above. There comes the F, and just filled with His goodness and lost in His love. Yeah, it's a great song.
It is. It's a wonderful piece, and it's been an absolute joy to speak to you, Phil. So thank you so much on behalf of everybody. Can we give Phil Smith a huge round of applause, please, everybody? Thank you. And it's been really lovely to have some of your pupils with us tonight as well, Phil. So lovely to meet Matthew and Anderson. They're the two I can see on my screen. Yeah. If you're ever in the UK, Matt, when you come back to the UK, come and give us a visit. You'll be very welcome. Just make sure you bring your cornet with you. Yeah. You'll need it. Okay.
Yeah, but that's here. I just didn't get it.
That's good. Okay.